I met Natalie at a wedding. Not ours, my cousin's. It was one of those big outdoor weddings with fairy lights and mason jars and a live band that knew how to get drunk uncles dancing. I was sitting at a table near the back, half listening to the speeches, when I heard someone laughing behind me. Like really laughing, not the polite kind. I turned around and saw her, blonde hair tied up in a loose twist, wine glass in hand, laughing with her whole face like someone who hadn't been to 5 other weddings that summer. We ended up talking during the reception, then dancing for a while, and at the end of the night, we exchanged numbers. She had this grounded energy, like she knew who she was and didn't care about putting on a show. I liked that about her from the start. We started dating a few weeks later. Nothing flashy, just coffee dates, bookstore visits, long walks and places where we could talk without distractions. Natalie worked as a pediatric nurse, and I was doing IT consulting, mostly contract work, jumping between offices. She was the more organized one, the kind who had a calendar for everything. I was the kind who set 3 alarms and still overslept. Somehow, we balanced each other out. After about a year and a half, I proposed. It wasn't some over-the-top thing. We were walking our dog. Well, her dog, but I'd grown attached, and I just stopped and said, I think I want to do this for the rest of my life. She looked at me and smiled like she already knew what I meant. We got married the next summer in a small ceremony at her parents' lake house. Nothing fancy, just us, family, and a few close friends. The night ended with us sitting on the dock, barefoot and still in our wedding clothes, watching the stars. It was the kind of night that feels like a bookmark in your life. The years that followed were good. Comfortable. We bought a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, corner lot, small yard, quiet neighbors. I went full-time with a firm that offered remote flexibility, and Natalie moved to part-time shifts so she could have more mornings off. We got a second dog. Started doing DIY projects on the weekends. Painted the guest room 3 different colors before we found one we both didn't hate. We had our routines, Sunday morning pancakes, Thursday night TV shows, bi-weekly dinners with her sister and brother-in-law. Nothing Instagram-worthy, but it was ours. We traveled a little, Mexico once, Vermont in the fall, a cabin trip in Oregon that rained the whole time but somehow ended up being our favorite. We laughed a lot. We fought sometimes too, but never in a way that made me question us. She had this way of making the house feel like home, and I tried to match her in all the ways I knew how. Birthdays, anniversaries, small surprises. We weren't perfect, but we felt solid. At least I thought we were. That's how it started. Just 2 people who met by chance, fell in love slowly, and built something they thought would last forever. The early years of our marriage felt like a rhythm we fell into without thinking. Looking back, it's strange how quickly 2 people can go from strangers to building a whole life side by side, without even realizing how much of themselves they've blended together. Natalie and I weren't flashy. We didn't make grand declarations or post long anniversary messages on Facebook. We just lived. We woke up next to each other. We made each other coffee. We navigated all the small, ordinary things that make up a life: grocery lists, dentist appointments, car maintenance, family birthdays. It all sounds mundane, I guess, but I used to think it was the kind of ordinary that makes you feel safe. She was the kind of person who liked things neat and planned out. I was a little more chaotic in that way, but I think we made space for each other's quirks. She had this whiteboard in the kitchen where she'd write down our meals for the week, and I'd always forget to buy something crucial like garlic or milk. It became a running joke between us, her with her careful lists, me always winging it. But it worked. She made life easier to manage, and I like to think I brought the spontaneity that kept it interesting. When we hit our 3rd year of marriage, we started seriously talking about having a baby. It wasn't a sudden thing. We had the conversation one evening on the couch while folding laundry, of all things. She just said, I think I'm ready, and I knew exactly what she meant. We had a spare room already. We'd always called it the office, but we both knew that was temporary. Within a few months, the office became a nursery, painted in soft blues and grays. We didn't know the gender at that point, and we wanted it to be a surprise. The pregnancy wasn't easy for her. She had a lot of morning sickness, and there were days when she barely got out of bed. I did what I could, ran errands, made her bland little meals she could keep down, learned how to install a car seat and assemble a crib. I think we both felt overwhelmed, but we leaned on each other. When our son was finally born, it was like the whole world paused. He came out screaming and red-faced, and I remember just holding him with this stunned feeling that I was now someone's father. I looked over at Natalie, exhausted and teary-eyed, and I felt like everything had clicked into place. Those first few months were a blur of diapers, midnight feedings, and walking laps around the living room to get him to sleep. But in the chaos, there was something sacred about it. Natalie was a natural. Tired, yes, and sometimes a little snappy, but she held our boy with this kind of quiet strength that I admired. We were both learning, messing up, trying again. It bonded us even more. I remember once, around 3 a.m., she looked at me while we were both rocking him back to sleep and whispered, "I've never loved you more than I do right now." That moment stayed with me. Family life became our new normal. The routines changed, but the sense of being in it together stayed. We'd take turns doing night duty. We made time for small date nights when we could, usually just a pizza and movie on the couch after the baby was asleep. And even though we were both exhausted half the time, there was a peace to it. We were building something, brick by brick. A home, a family, a future. I didn't know it then, but these were the years I go back to most often in my head, when everything still felt whole. By the time our son turned 3, Natalie and I had gotten the hang of being parents, at least enough to feel like we weren't just surviving day to day. We'd found our groove. Life had its noise and chaos, but it was a kind of chaos that felt right. Finger paint on the dining table, toys hiding under couch cushions, laundry never quite finished. And we didn't mind. That mess, in a way, was a reflection of the life we'd created together. It felt full. Natalie was back to working part-time, mostly short hospital shifts a few days a week. I'd adjusted my work schedule to be more remote, which meant I could be there more in the mornings and afternoons. That flexibility made a difference, not just in terms of childcare, but in the way we stayed connected as a couple. I think a lot of people lose track of each other after becoming parents. We tried not to. We made a rule to have dinner together, just the two of us, at least once a week, even if it just meant heating leftovers and talking about nothing in particular after putting our son to bed. It wasn't glamorous, but it reminded us that we were more than just parents. Weekends became our recharge days. Saturdays were for errands, grocery shopping, cleaning, maybe a quick park visit. Sundays were slower. Natalie loved making breakfast, banana pancakes, scrambled eggs, sometimes just cereal if the night before had been rough. Our son would be in his high chair, flinging Cheerios while we talked about the week ahead, about what color to paint the hallway, about maybe planning a weekend trip once things slowed down. The conversations were light, but they felt like the glue holding everything in place. We also started connecting more with other couples in our neighborhood. Natalie joined a mom group that did stroller walks and meetups at the park, and I started hosting a monthly poker night with a few guys from the area. They weren't lifelong friends or anything, but it felt good to be part of something bigger than just our little household. We even started attending these low-key backyard get-togethers, BBQs in the summer, potlucks in the fall. It helped. We had community, and we had each other. Financially, we were doing okay. Not rich, not scraping by. I'd gotten a small promotion that gave us enough breathing room to talk about bigger plans, maybe a second car, or even starting to save for a bigger house down the line. Natalie had always wanted a yard big enough for a garden. She'd talk about it sometimes when we were lying in bed, how she'd grow tomatoes, basil, maybe lavender. I'd tease her that we could barely keep a houseplant alive, and she'd just smile and say, "I'll learn." Those were quiet years, but they were good, peaceful in their own way. We celebrated birthdays with cupcakes and homemade banners. We took a road trip one summer, just the three of us, driving up the coast and staying in small towns along the way. We sang off-key in the car, stopped too often for snacks, and probably packed way more than we needed. But it was one of those trips where nothing dramatic happened, and that made it perfect. I remember thinking one night, as I watched her tuck our son into bed, that I couldn't imagine loving her more than I did in that moment. Not because of anything grand or poetic, just because she was there, steady and kind, building this life with me. I thought we were exactly where we were meant to be, and that's how things stayed. For a while, at least. Life felt like it was moving in a straight line, one quiet season blending into the next. Our son started preschool, and we finally felt like we were hitting a stride where things weren't constantly in motion. There was some breathing room, enough to actually finish a cup of coffee while it was still hot, or sit on the porch together in the evenings without 100 interruptions. That stillness didn't last long. Natalie told me she was pregnant again on a Thursday evening, right after I got home from work. I remember I had just taken off my shoes and was halfway through opening a package when she handed me a card. It wasn't my birthday, and we didn't really do cards just because, so I was confused. Inside was a little drawing. She'd helped our son scribble a stick figure family, but this time with 4 people. She pointed to the smallest figure and said, "That's the new one." I think I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't shock exactly. We'd talked about another baby, but never made any formal plans. Still, once it sunk in, I was smiling. Nervous, but smiling. She looked more excited than I'd seen her in a long time. That part stayed with me. This pregnancy was easier than the first, at least physically. Natalie had fewer symptoms, more energy. She glowed in that way people always talk about, but rarely actually mean. There were evenings where she'd sit on the couch reading parenting books while I rubbed her feet, and we'd talk about names, school choices, which car seat we needed now that we were officially becoming a family of 4. Our son was too young to fully understand what was happening, but he loved talking to her belly. He called the baby Pickle. It stuck. Our daughter, Sophie, was born on a cold morning in early spring. I remember the way Natalie squeezed my hand, the way she cried when she heard Sophie's first cries. The nurse laid her on Natalie's chest, and I remember thinking she looked so small and perfect and fragile, like the world was too loud for her. Sophie had dark hair and long fingers, and a cry that sounded more offended than scared. Natalie held her like she'd been waiting her whole life to meet her. The first weeks were hard, harder than I remembered with our son. Maybe it was the juggling act, trying to give attention to a newborn and a 4-year-old at the same time. Maybe it was the sleep deprivation catching up faster this time. We were both tired. Natalie seemed especially drained some days, like the smallest things would overwhelm her. She bounced back quickly, though. She always did. I tried to shoulder more around the house. Meals, daycare drop-offs, late-night bottle runs, whatever I could do to keep things afloat. We took fewer photos the second time around. I only noticed that later. But we were in it, together, doing the work. There was still laughter, plenty of it, but there were also more silences. Not angry ones. Just tired. We talked less about dreams and more about schedules. It felt like a phase, the way life gets stretched thin when you've got 2 little ones and very little time for yourselves. Still, I was proud of what we had. 2 healthy kids. A home. A life that made sense, even if it wasn't always easy. I believed, with everything in me, that we were growing stronger. That we were closer than ever, just weathering the storm of early parenthood. That's what I told myself. And I never imagined anything different. Looking back, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when something started to feel off. It wasn't a thunderbolt or some dramatic red flag. It was more like waking up one day and realizing your house is colder than usual. You tell yourself the thermostat must be broken, or maybe you just need another blanket. But the chill doesn't go away. At first, it was little things. I'd come home from work and Natalie would be unusually distracted. I'd ask how her day went, and her answers started to sound like scripts. Quick, vague responses like, busy, or same as always. Nothing strange on the surface, but the warmth behind her words started to fade. When I asked follow-up questions, she'd change the subject or give me that look like I was being too much. At first I thought maybe it was the sleep deprivation, or the pressure of parenting 2 kids. God knows I was exhausted, too. We were still sharing the same routines, school runs, grocery shopping, kids' bath times, but there was less affection. Not just physically, but in the quiet ways we used to connect. The spontaneous hugs in the kitchen, the little touches when we passed each other in the hallway, the whispered inside jokes at night. They weren't happening anymore. I'd reach for her hand on the couch, and she'd pull away, saying she was hot or tired or just not in the mood to be touched. I try not to take it personally. I told myself, this is what marriage looks like after kids. You get into ruts. You grow tired. You recover. I did what most people do when they feel the distance but don't want to acknowledge it. I doubled down. I brought home her favorite wine one night, just because. I offered to take the kids out on a Saturday, so she could have the house to herself. I even arranged for her to have a full spa day. Booked the appointment myself. Left a little note on the steering while telling her to enjoy it. She thanked me, smiled, and left. But when she came home, she was quiet. Not in a relaxed, peaceful way. More like her mind was somewhere else. At night, I'd lie awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling while she slept next to me, wondering if we were okay. She didn't seem angry. There was no big fight. No yelling. Just this slow, creeping distance. And I started asking myself if maybe it was me. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I'd become too routine, too boring, too predictable. I even considered that she might be going through something privately, Postpartum depression, maybe. Or something with work. She rarely talked about work anymore. That used to be her favorite topic. Now I'd hear more about appointments, tasks, schedules, nothing about the people or her day. I brought it up once, tentatively. We were folding laundry in the living room, and I asked, "Are you okay? You seem somewhere else lately." She looked at me like she didn't understand the question at first. Then she said, "I'm fine. Just tired. It's nothing." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then she changed the subject and asked if I could pick up diapers tomorrow. I didn't push it. Maybe I should have. But at the time, I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The thing about suspicion is that it doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in slowly, like a fog. You try to wave it away at first. You make excuses for it. You tell yourself it's just in your head, that every marriage goes through seasons, that stress explains the distance. But at some point, you stop feeling reassured by your own logic. And the silence between you and your partner doesn't feel like peace anymore. It feels like something's being hidden in it. That's where I was. Natalie and I were still doing all the same things on the surface. Still parenting, still showing up to family dinners, still answering the same daily questions. Did you take the chicken out? Did you get gas? Can you grab diapers on the way home? But there was a hollow edge to it all, like we were reading from a script. I kept thinking, maybe this is just what year 8 of marriage looks like. Maybe we've just settled so deeply into routine that we forgot how to be close. But even as I told myself that, little things kept piling up. Natalie started spending more time on her phone. Not dramatically, not in some obvious, hiding in the bathroom kind of way. But I noticed she always had it in her hand. Even when we were watching a movie together, or folding laundry, or sitting on the porch, I'd glance over, and she'd quickly tilt the screen away. Not enough to make it blatant, just subtle enough that it could pass as nothing. Once or twice I asked, "Who are you texting?" And she'd smile, say just Kate, or work stuff, then put the phone down. And then there were the late nights. She started staying up later than usual, telling me she just needed a little alone time. Which, in itself, is fair. Everyone needs space. But when I'd come out to grab water or check on something, I'd find her at the kitchen table, staring at her phone with this closed-off expression. She'd quickly lock the screen and say, "Everything okay?" Like I was the one interrupting. Once, I asked if she was stressed, and she sighed and said, "I just don't feel like myself lately." But when I asked what she meant, she brushed it off. "It's nothing. Just tired." She kept saying that. Just tired. It became the answer for everything. One weekend, I suggested we take a short trip, just us. Maybe drop the kids with her sister, rent a cabin, unplug for a few days. She looked at me like I'd asked her to move to another country. "I don't think I can swing that right now," she said. "There's too much going on." She didn't offer to plan for later. She didn't ask to talk about it. She just moved on. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't kissed me in weeks. Not even in passing. I started watching her more, not in a paranoid way. At least I told myself it wasn't. But just noticing things I hadn't before. The way she laughed at texts but never mentioned what was funny. The way she avoided eye contact when I asked how her day was. The way she seemed almost relieved when I told her I had to work late. I didn't have proof. I didn't even have a theory yet. Just this feeling in my gut that something was shifting under our feet. And I couldn't tell if it was marriage fatigue or something deeper. But I was afraid to ask. Because what if I didn't want to hear the answer? It's a strange kind of loneliness when the person you're missing is sleeping in the same bed as you. I'd lie there at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Natalie breathe beside me steady, calm, as if everything in her world was fine. And I'd wonder if she could feel the same space I did between us. If it gnawed at her the way it gnawed at me. Or if she'd just gotten used to it. Or worse, preferred it. By now, the questions in my head weren't quiet anymore. I still didn't have answers, still didn't have any solid reason to accuse her of anything, but something wasn't right. I knew that. I'd catch her staring into space sometimes, like her mind was somewhere far away. When I asked what she was thinking about, she'd give me a polite smile and say, "Just tired." Always tired. And it stopped feeling like exhaustion and started feeling like distance. She'd started going out more too, just quick errands, or meetups with her coworkers, or grabbing coffee with Kate. Always Kate. I wasn't tracking her or anything. I never felt the need to do that. But I started noticing patterns. She'd go out dressed a little differently, more put together than usual. And she was always on edge before leaving, like she was anticipating something. She'd check her phone constantly until she walked out the door, then go radio silent for hours. When she came home, she looked relaxed. Almost too relaxed. Once, I asked if she wanted me to come along to one of these get-togethers. I said it casually, like I was just trying to get out of the house and be social. She froze for a second, then gave me this practiced laugh and said, "Trust me, you'd be bored to death. It's all work gossip and baby talk." Then she kissed me on the cheek and went back to folding laundry. I didn't say anything else, but that kiss? It felt foreign. Like a gesture she knew she was supposed to do, not something she actually felt. Our conversations thinned out. We used to talk in the evenings, even if just about our days, the kids, something we saw online. Now, it was mostly logistics. Who's picking up our son from school, what time Sophie's appointment is, whether we had milk. I'd try to steer the conversation somewhere deeper, ask her how she was doing, not just surface level, but really doing. She'd always smile and say, "I'm good." Really? But her smile never lasted more than a second. I remember one night in particular. I'd made dinner while she was out, nothing fancy, just pasta and a bottle of wine we'd had tucked away. I even lit a candle, hoping it might bring back a little of the old warmth between us. When she came home, she looked surprised. Not in a happy way. More like she'd been caught off guard. She sat down, ate quietly, thanked me, and then said she had a headache and went to bed early. I stayed at the table long after she left, staring at the candle while it burned down to a puddle of wax. Something was wrong. I knew it. I didn't want to say the words out loud yet, even to myself, but they were forming in the background of every thought. She's hiding something. She's pulling away. She's not here, not really. And deep down, I think I already knew the truth. I just didn't have proof. Not yet. It happened on a Tuesday. I don't know why that detail sticks with me, but it does. There wasn't anything special about the day. I went to work, sat through meetings, replied to emails, picked up groceries on the way home. The kind of day that makes you feel like your life is just humming along quietly. But beneath the surface, I was already planning something I wasn't proud of. The suspicion had become too loud to ignore. I wasn't eating right. I was checking her phone in the middle of the night while she slept. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. And even though she had her notifications silenced and most conversations cleared, I kept seeing the same name pop up, Kate. At first I brushed it off, told myself it really could be her friend. But something didn't add up. The way the messages came through. The way her whole demeanor changed when they did. I didn't want to become some paranoid cliché, but the doubt had taken root. And the worst part? It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about our kids. I had heard stories before, men raising children who weren't biologically theirs. I never thought I'd be one of them. But I couldn't get the thought out of my head. Our daughter looked nothing like me. She had different coloring, different features. I had always chalked it up to genetics being weird. But now I wasn't sure. And the thought made me physically sick. So I did something I never imagined I would. I ordered a DNA test. Quietly. One of those at-home kits. I swabbed myself when Natalie was out running errands, and I used a spare toothbrush for our son and a pacifier for our daughter. I felt disgusting doing it. Like I was betraying the very family I was trying to protect. But I had to know. I told myself, if I'm wrong, I'll never speak of this again. I'll burn the results and find a way to fix whatever's broken. But if I was right, I didn't even know what I'd do. The results came in 12 days later. I opened the email in my parked car outside a pharmacy. I remember that clearly because I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tap the screen. It felt like the moment before a car crash, when everything slows down and your brain tries to deny what it knows is coming. Both children. Not biologically mine. Not one. Both. I just sat there for I don't know how long. 10 minutes. An hour. Time didn't feel real. My ears were ringing. My heart was pounding so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. I kept reading and rereading the words, as if they might change if I stared hard enough. As if this nightmare might correct itself. But they didn't change. And neither did the truth. Natalie had lied to me for years. She had built an entire life with me on a foundation of betrayal. She looked me in the eye every day while carrying someone else's child twice. She let me name them, feed them, rock them to sleep. She let me believe they were mine. And they were. In every way but blood. I didn't drive home right away. I just sat in that car, staring through the windshield, trying to figure out who I was now. What this meant. What I was going to do. Because something had just broken that couldn't be put back together. I didn't go home right after I read the results. I couldn't. I just drove, nowhere in particular. I went past our son's school, past the grocery store where we used to shop on weekends, past the park where we took the kids to feed the ducks. Everything I looked at felt hollow. All these places that once held memories now just echoed with the sound of something snapping inside me. For over 10 years, I lived inside a story someone else wrote for me. A story where I was the devoted husband, the proud father, the steady presence. And it was a lie. Not just a mistake or a misstep, an orchestrated, sustained lie. And Natalie was the one who told it. By the time I made it home that night, the house felt unfamiliar. The lights were off. Her car was in the driveway. I stood there in the dark for a long time, just staring at it. My heart wasn't racing anymore. I think it had done all the braking it could possibly do. When I finally stepped inside, the house was quiet. Peaceful. She was already asleep. I watched her for a moment, curled up on her side of the bed like she didn't have the weight of a single secret on her. I didn't say a word. I just went to the guest room and lay there with my eyes open until the sun came up. In the morning, I was calm. I made coffee like I always do. Sat at the kitchen table with the DNA results printed out in a manila folder. I didn't even touch them. I just waited. She came downstairs in her robe, hair tied up, yawning, like it was any other morning. When she saw me sitting there in silence, her face changed. Just for a second, but enough. Her body froze like it recognized something before her brain caught up. She said, "Hey, everything okay?" I didn't respond. I just slid the folder across the table. She opened it, and I watched her read. Her hands began to shake. Her face lost all color. She didn't say anything right away. Didn't deny it. Didn't cry. Just sat there staring at the page like it had opened a trapdoor beneath her. Finally, she whispered, "You tested them?" And all I could say was, "They're not mine." That was it. All the rage, the grief, the confusion, I had already lived it. What came next wasn't anger. It was detachment. She tried to speak, but the words came slow, like she was reaching for an excuse that didn't exist. "I was going to tell you," she said. And I laughed. Not a kind laugh. A bitter, stunned kind of sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. "You had 10 years to tell me. You watched me name them. You let me believe they were mine while you carried someone else's children. Twice. And you were going to tell me?" She just kept shaking her head, eyes wide like she was the one who had been betrayed. "Please, we can talk about this. You don't have to." "I do," I said, standing up. "You and the kids need to leave this house. You have 1 hour to pack your things." That's when she broke. The tears started. She begged me to think about the children, pleaded with me not to do this to them. But it wasn't me who had done this. She had. She made those decisions. She lived with them for over a decade. I was just finally refusing to carry them for her. I walked upstairs and started gathering her clothes. I pulled suitcases from the closet and started packing for her. She followed me, sobbing, saying I didn't mean this, that I was just shocked, that we could fix it. But she didn't even deny it. That part crushed me the most, how little effort she made to pretend otherwise. I went into the garage and got the spare keys to the car I bought her. She was still trying to talk when I walked back in and held out my hand. "Give me the keys." She hesitated. "You're taking the car too?" "Yes," I said. "It's mine. Just like everything else you've been living off for the past 10 years. When she left, the kids were still in pajamas. I couldn't look them in the eye. I knew it wasn't their fault. None of this was. But I couldn't look at them without remembering the betrayal, without feeling every ounce of the life I had poured into a lie. She buckled them into the car, crying the entire time. Before she closed the door, she looked at me one last time, her face a mess of makeup and desperation. "Please," she said, "don't do this." "You already did," I replied, and walked back into the house without another word. By sunset, I had placed every last piece of their belongings on the front lawn. Her clothes, the kids' toys, the photo frames, the leftover diapers. All of it. I locked the door behind me, took a long breath, and sat on the bare living room floor. It was over. The first few days after I kicked them out were quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It was the kind of silence that follows a house fire. No smoke, no flames, just the sound of everything you thought was solid reduced to ash. The bedsheets still smelled like her shampoo. There were toys shoved under the couch cushions, tiny socks still in the laundry basket. I walked past them all like I was moving through a museum exhibit of a life I no longer belonged to. Every corner of the house felt like a lie. I didn't cry. Not once. I didn't scream or punch walls or get drunk or do any of the things people told me would come once the shock wore off. What I felt was something quieter, emptier. I had loved my family deeply with everything I had, and now that love had nowhere to go. It was like someone had cut the power to my body and all I could do was sit in the dark. I stayed off social media. I didn't tell many people what happened. A few close friends knew, and my brother. My parents didn't ask questions. They just came over and helped me box up the rest of her things. I didn't want explanations anymore. I didn't want apologies or closure or even revenge. I'd already taken everything I needed. Now, all I wanted was to reclaim something that was me. So I started small. I deleted every photo of us from my phone. I cleared the bedroom. I moved into the guest room, the one place in the house that didn't feel contaminated. I started sleeping again, not much, but more than I had in weeks. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. Stopped imagining how she'd explain herself if I gave her the chance. I had already heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I went back to work after a week. Threw myself into projects. I changed gyms. Started lifting again, harder this time. Not for revenge. Not to win the breakup. Just to feel alive. I reconnected with a few friends I'd let drift over the years. I told one of them the truth over a few beers on his porch, and he just nodded, quiet, and said, "You didn't deserve that, man." And somehow, that sentence stayed with me. I didn't. And I didn't have to keep punishing myself like I did. A month later, I met someone. I wasn't looking. I wasn't ready. But I met her anyway. Her name is Lena. She works in community outreach for a nonprofit downtown, and we met at a work event I almost skipped. She's kind in a quiet way, not overly sweet or trying too hard. We talked about music, of all things, old records we both grew up with, songs we'd play on long drives. I didn't tell her anything about my past right away. I just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger or grief. I felt curiosity. Hope, maybe. We've been on a few dates since then. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me what it feels like to laugh and not have it end with guilt. She doesn't pry. She just meets me where I am. And where I am now is no longer broken. It's been just over 6 months since everything came undone. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear small footsteps in the hallway or see her robe hanging on the back of the bathroom door. Muscle memory, I guess. The body remembering a life even after the heart has moved on. But those moments are fewer now. And when they come, I don't flinch. I just let them pass. That life is gone. And that's okay. I've changed. There's no other way to put it. Not in the loud, dramatic sense that movies like to show. No shaving my head or burning wedding photos or driving across the country on a self-discovery trip. Just subtle changes. I don't check my phone with a pit in my stomach anymore. I don't analyze every look or silence in conversation, waiting for the punchline. I don't live on edge, waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under me. Most of the time, I don't even think about her. What I do think about are the lessons that cost me more than I ever wanted to pay. How trust isn't something you can build alone. How betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like a smile hiding a secret. How being a good man, a loyal partner, a present father, doesn't guarantee you anything in return. And how love, real love, doesn't live in lies. I've had people ask me if I miss the kids. And the truth is, yes. Sometimes, painfully. I raised them. I held them through fevers, taught my son how to tie his shoes, sang to my daughter when she couldn't sleep. My body remembers all of that, even if my blood doesn't bind us. But I had to let them go. Not because they didn't matter, but because she made sure they would never truly be mine. And keeping them in my life would have meant staying connected to the one person who tore it all apart. There are still hard days. I won't lie about that. Sometimes I see a dad pushing a stroller and I feel it, the hollow ache, the echo of what could have been. But then I remind myself, that wasn't my life. It was a life I was cast in without ever reading the script. I did my part. I gave everything I had. And I walked away with my dignity, which is more than I can say for her. Lena and I are still seeing each other. We're taking it slow. I've told her most of the story now. Not all at once, but piece by piece, as I felt ready. She listened. No pity, no judgment. Just quiet understanding. She told me something once that stuck with me. She said, "You didn't lose your family. You lost a lie. What you have now, even if it's just yourself, is more real than any of that ever was." And I think she's right. I used to think survival meant getting back to where I was before. But it doesn't. It means finding peace in where you are now, bruised, maybe, but still breathing. Still whole. If you're reading this and you're going through something similar, I don't have advice. I just want you to know you're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're not alone. Some things break you. But some things break you open. And that's where the healing starts.